Hello, I'm Julianne with Healthy Living with Julianne. Welcome to my health series, Steps to Boost Your Immune System. Today I'm with a very special guest. In case you're feeling a little bit of stress, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of trauma during this health crisis, I'm with a special person who's going to help give us tools to address these. Maryam Ovissi is the owner of Beloved Yoga and a certified trauma instructor. In her book, Care for of the Whole Self, Maryam provides yoga-inspired practices for befriending the whole self. So during these hectic times, during this health crisis, you may be multitasking. You may be juggling work, family, kids, elderly parents. Going to the grocery store seems to be a project these days. And in our data-driven society, we were already a little bit overstressed. Our nervous systems were already a little bit taxed. But now the health crisis has really placed more of a burden on our bodies. And so I'm very excited about this book and Maryam sharing with us some tools to help us not only de-stress and calm down, but start to develop habit patterns in our lives so that we have tools to manage on a daily basis, because this could go on. And so she is going to talk about 5 dimensions of the body: physical, energetic, mental, emotional, and sensual. And then she's gonna, in light of that, give us a couple of tools which we can implement on a daily basis, a few minutes, several times a day, around breath work, breathing. I don't know about you, but when I get stressed, I find myself breathing shorter instead of breathing deeply. And so going to yoga is very helpful. They're like, remember to breathe deeply. The second thing is movement, is moving our bodies. For those of you who are athletes, you may want to consider yoga to complement your workout. And 3, meditation, starting to calm our minds down and our bodies and our nervous system. And 4th, poetry. So welcome, Maryam.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julian, for being a friend and supporting my work as well.
Oh, you're wonderful. You're wonderful. So Maryam has owned Beloved Yoga for several years. She has also coordinated the Love Your Body Yoga Festival at the Raston Town Center for 8, 9, 10 years, which I participated in. And so very excited to have you here today, Maryam.
Thank you.
Excellent. So do you want to start to help us attack these, attack is probably a bad word in yoga, approach these stresses that we're feeling, and start to give us a framework so how we can go forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, as you said it really quite well, there's a few frameworks in the book, and one of them is this idea of the different dimensions of who we are. And I've taken inspiration from a very classic framework used in yoga therapy and deriving its source from the Upanishads called the Panchamaya, just in case there's any kind of yogic beings out there, and I want to always kind of culturally appreciate the source that this is from. And then I've expanded it to meet kind of modern life, modernity. And so in the book, first, there's several sections addressing these various aspects of ourselves. And I know in your own work, you know that you can't just talk about food without talking about emotions about food, right? And then talking about breathing, and then talking about, well, how's your mind? I mean, we end up in this field of holistic both practicing, having to look at the different aspects of ourselves, but it can be really overwhelming to do that. So the book is not thick, it's small, and there's just a few pages. There you go. for each section, just to begin to expand perspective about the dimensions. And I've added to it, I don't have spirituality in there as a dimension, and I want to address that for a moment. And that's because I believe it is the experience of an integrated being that is the spiritual experience. And integrated is not only me and I, but it's the we. It's integrated in our world, is a spiritual experience, and it's not something that is just pursued separately. It's the byproduct of integrated life. And sensuality is another one that I speak to that is not something that is easily, I would say, touched, but I address it from a perspective of being in touch with nature. I think that this is a key of being connected to our sensual selves. And it's not just walking through nature, it is embracing nature. It is having it in our homes and also going outside of our homes to be with it. And I bet you totally agree.
Totally agree. As a hiker, you can see all the pictures behind me.
There you go. Exactly.
I'm always running around the mountains.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes you got to lay down on the mountains, and sometimes you got to embrace a tree, and sometimes you got to hold the leaves or the plants, and literally be intimate with nature. And I think this is a really important aspect of our sensuality. So that's the framework. Now the tools. Shall I go on to the tools?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the tools are divided in 3 times of day, and there's 3 tools for each one. And then on my website, there's a video for each tool. So there's something written about it, but it's also, there's an example given where you can just I show you the video and then you do it on your own. But the idea is that there are 3 times of day, and it has to do with the positions of the sun and transition points of your own life individually. And often there's the beginning of the day, there's the middle of the day, and there's the end of the day. And these are really powerful places of connection with oneself and what is happening around us. And I'm sure many people have heard this saying, change your morning, change your life, and just taking those habits in the morning and making small changes can impact in big ways. This yoga is an inner workout. It's not an external workout. So there's no this idea of like you have to do this for a certain number of hours every day. There's no regime that has to be followed. It's very individual. Yet what is in common, and this is a little bit from my own background through the Krishnamacharya background of modern yoga, is that there is daily practice with the breath. You can go hike, you can go run, you can go skydive, you can go bicycle, whatever you want to do. And you still have a daily breath practice. So every part of the day has a daily breath practice. And that's what I'd love to share. If you want to go on a little exploration.
Absolutely. If you wanted to show us a little bit of breath, sure. That would be great.
Yeah. So breath and posture work together, and we do have to address our posture because it will impact the quality of our breath. So first, let's take a moment and just kind of sit up wherever you are and whenever you're listening to this, and find your length in your spine and just feel that uplift of energy. And then we'll do a few gentle movements of the spine because sometimes we're breathing and we're rigid. So just to loosen up, and we'll do lateral bends. And as you exhale, just laterally bend, and I'm going to mirror you. Yeah, you can just bend to the right. And then you inhale, and then you exhale and laterally bend to the left. And I'll just do this a couple of times. So there's some interesting literature around when we're experiencing trauma, that what tends to happen in the body, especially when we're getting highly stressed, is we tend to become very rigid. And lateral bends are a category of movement, of the 7 movements of the spine, that help release the rigidity. So it's just something to know when you're feeling like this gripping and you can feel literally this tension. Laterally move, let yourself sway a little bit, and it just helps kind of soften the landscape of the body. And then we'll roll the shoulders around as well, rolling, yeah, whichever direction you would like. Perfect. Excellent. So the bronchial tubes from our respiratory system move right into the upper top of the lungs, and then they spread out to fill the lungs. So there's a very natural inhale that expands the lungs. And then as you exhale, that energy comes back, and that all what it is not needed by the body comes out through the bronchial tubes, then out through the nose, ideally, not always the mouth, sometimes the mouth, but most of the time you want to breathe through the nose. This part of the body, the upper sternum, is really important in yoga. And if anyone knows about the heart chakra, and the heart keeps being recategorized as a gland, as a third brain now, and as a major organ of the body, we take a moment and touch this part of your body. This will be the little practice. And then as we inhale, explore expansion. So expand, you can think of it like you're opening the windows of the day. And then you exhale and you bring it back and just softly land. And if you're not comfortable touching the body, you don't have to. You can just let the hands hover a little bit over the sternum. And then you exhale. And you can close your eyes or just look down, or if you got a little plant to look at in your home, you can look at that. And just keep exploring this expansion, breathing through the nose and coming back in. Inhaling and then exhaling. And I'll add one more layer, that there's no rush. So we inhale, natural pause, exhale, natural pause. So one more on your own. Natural pause, exhale, natural pause. And just take a moment to just feel. Breath is natural. Perfect. Thank you. Hope that brought some people that are watching this just that little moment. And if that was only a minute, maybe a minute and a half through the explanation. And this is what I believe, and in the work that I've done over the 10, 15 years working with individuals, and what we've seen is that just taking that amount of time can shift your nervous system to help reduce inflammation, to help soften the intense release of cortisol, to get your HPATG access a little bit online instead of getting offline. And most importantly, to just touch that sense of peace, even as for a few seconds. It's so valuable to never underestimate even those few seconds of ease and peace.
And what's very nice is this can be done at the desk.
Exactly.
During the day.
Exactly. Anywhere, really, right? Even on your hike, you could probably pause, right?
That's right.
And take just those moments to just breathe.
Watch the deer.
Yeah, one of my clients is an avid fly fisher. And when he goes to these beautiful rivers of the Shenandoah, there's a lot of like action in that fly fishing. It's like a whole art form in itself. And we also talk about, and he does this where he just sits before he goes into that whole activity. He just sits and takes it all in and just breathes with the water and nature. Sometimes we get caught up in doing, and this is the entry point to being. You look
Yes,
relaxed.
when I hike at Shenandoah, which I do quite a bit, I usually hike by water. And I often sit, I close my eyes, and then I'm off for a nap. Especially if it's a sunny, hot day in July.
You're resting. Yeah, resting to recover. Yeah, and this is what we need to do. I think that's a beautiful example. We go, 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 and then we got to pause. We got to rest. Yeah, but there's a quote I read this morning in class, and it's from Young Pueblo, and it's he opens up the book and he says there's two things we're going to learn in the 21st century, and he says we're going to learn that when we harm others, we are harming ourselves, and when we heal ourselves, we are healing the world. And it's really beautiful invitation to, like, don't underestimate taking this time for yourself to just get peaceful and experience ease.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So the next step would be movement after breath work.
Yeah, and we do it a little bit in reverse. That's why I started with a little movement. We move, then breathe, then quiet the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the movement is what I hope everyone can walk away with, is 7 movements of the spine. Take daily practice for 7 movements of the spine. We did the lateral, then there's elongation, then there's flexion where we round, then there's rotation where we twist, and then there's extension where we back bend. And we all have various ranges of motion, but the movement helps create fluidity and hydration in our spine. And hydration there's hydration from nourishment, and then there's a hydration that's needed from movement. There we go. There we go. Perfect. So the 7 movements, and I have a little sweet video on my website where people can do it. But once you do it, you know it, and you just can sit on that when you wake up, sit on the edge of your bed and just do the 7 movements, or stand. You can do it laying down, table. Before you go to bed, take a twist in your bed, lay back, hug one knee in, cross it over. Just like take the fibers of your body and move them. Otherwise, you will feel tight.
And one of the challenges during this health crisis is people are staying in the same position. Yeah. We used to have breaks, right? Where you get up, you take your kids to school, you go to work, there's a break.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You get up at the office, you walk around, there's a break. You go to the grocery store, whereas now, you get up, you walk to the office, the kitchen in the office. Yeah. And so we're sitting, and the ileocecal valve, the psoas, all of these things in the stomach and the abdominal area are getting tight. The chest, we're sitting forward, typing. And so these are all wonderful for loosening up the spine, as Maryam said, and changing the position. I also use a foam roller just to throw that in there. And I lie on it because I've had 4 car accidents. But these are wonderful. I've been taking class from Maryam at her studio for years and have learned a lot. So these are wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's my recommendation, especially, I know we don't want to be online, but take a class online. You get to at least connect in some kind of community. For us, we do a little connection at the beginning and at the end, and then otherwise the cameras are off. We let you have your own practice at home. But it's a nice way to we can still have Sangha, we can still have community. online. It's really important, and that getting around and moving has so much to do with interacting with other people. And it's just, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for those of you who are at home, maybe you're new to yoga, you haven't considered it, one of the benefits, you can take classes in studio at Beloved Yoga with Maryam and her teachers, or at home, is that your whole family can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to have a space, the kids, the parents, maybe the dogs are watching. And the other thing is, try different teachers, okay? Because different teachers bring different experience, different skill level, different focus. Some focus. When I first had my car accidents, I went and they were always giving me props because I had a frozen shoulder. And so the teachers will work with you at different levels. And then, of course, for those of you who are avid athletes and you think yoga, that's how I was, until I started doing it and thought, whoa, I've got a few things to learn here. It's a great complement for your athletics. And for those of you who are lifting weights, which I do my yoga stretches in between my, in addition to what Mary's describing, I do it in between my sets. So my legs are going up and they're over, and I'm quite the amusement in the weight room.
Yes, we need to, you're contracting them and then you want to lengthen them. I mean, this is, these interval levels of training that are being shown to be so effective, and realizing we don't need to do so many hours of this type of training, but just, I think it really, sometimes when you learn about yoga, you learn about how to incorporate some of the movements to create space in the body. When you learn about the movements of the spine, you start to see your life through the movements of your spine. You start to realize, like, wow, I've been curled over my computer for 6 hours. What is the opposite movement? You have language for it. You don't need to ask anyone. You'll know, like, oh, a back bend. Let me lay back. Let me do a couple cobras. Let me find my breath to lift up the front body. So the posture is really important in the breath journey.
So would you talk a little bit about meditation and how people can get started or even deepen their own meditation practices?
Sure, absolutely. Well, we are living in exciting times because we have this, we have so many meditation apps, from Headspace to Calm to the Insight Timer and many others, that I'm always hearing individuals that come for the private that have been using often some of these apps. And what the apps give you is really the entry point of what's taught in traditional meditation paths. And the entry point to calming the mind and quieting the mind is focus, is to gather your senses, because senses is how we're assessing our world. And if you are continuously assessing your world, and if you have if anxiety and this stuff comes out because there's a hyper assessment going on of the world, then you want to learn, how do I take my senses and just like bring them in? And this is a first step of meditation, is to find a way to come into the moment. And it's not shutting your eyes and just getting quiet. That may turn off a majority of people. It is first sensorily quieting, then focusing on the breath, and then there's a whole range of other tools that open up. So in the book, I talk about using an object of nature. I have orchids all around me, and I will often gaze at one in my morning practice. And I pick something that is alive in my home.
Perhaps your parakeets?
My bird, exactly, the birds.
Which we can hear.
Yes, if you're hearing, that's what's happening. They have their own little bird room.
Symphony.
But it can also be a candle. This very traditional form is using Tritaka, the candle gazing. And then you quiet, you gather the mind on one thing. And this is why touch is used. This becomes a place of bringing my senses. Then you can close your eyes. If you're comfortable, you can always keep them open and focus on the breath. Focus on the waves of your breath. It's called Lahari. Focus on the waves, the expansion, and that gentle embrace that the exhale gives you. And then you may notice your mind wanders, starts to analyze sounds, or you might want to, you're thinking about what's next. And that's okay. You kindly and lovingly draw yourself back to focusing on the breath. Just and Lahari, the expansion, the wave, following the wave. And that's where we begin.
So talk about whether people should be expanding the lungs and the chest or the diaphragm, or both.
So whether you think about it or not, your diaphragm is going to be working. It's the muscle of the respiratory system that is basically changing pressure in the upper and lower torso. Now, what's incredible is we can also voluntarily be with our breath, and you can focus on breathing more in your upper body, upper lungs. You can focus more on expanding the middle lungs, or you can expand more the lower lungs. And what I mean by that is you literally expand the muscles that are in this region, because the lungs, when you fill the lungs, air rises. So you can never inhale to the bottom of your lungs, but you can expand the bottom of your lungs and your diaphragm to make space for that air to enter, because air fills from the top and the middle and the lower. But we can make space for that. We're multidimensional, so we also want to create space around the sides. Be careful to not close your arms really rigid. Your back, you usually don't want it to be on any surface. Free all around, because you limit. And expansion of diaphragm. When the diaphragm inhale, it opens. And when you exhale, there's a gently drawing in. And the lungs mimic it as well.
Well, this is wonderful because we're in a health crisis. And one of the first places, if someone is vulnerable, the lungs are one of the first places, the sinus, the mouth, and the lungs. So would you agree that this helps to strengthen the lungs?
Yes, I do. And I, you know, there's gifts in everything. COVID-19 is a very traumatic virus. You know, we're navigating this, but there's also a teacher within this virus. And I really believe, if you looked at those studies that came out way early about people who were smokers, people who were vaping, people had compromised lungs, and taking time to increase your capacity, your lung capacity, reducing nicotine use was like huge what it did in our survivorship of COVID. And I wish there was attention from a public health policy that was made to the citizens of this country to be like, wake up, we got to breathe more, and let's do that. And those that attuned themselves to kind of studying the virus started to realize the benefits from having a healthy breath and beginning a breath practice. This is the gift that's been given. Now it's up to us to share it with each other. it's huge for the survivalship of this virus.
Yes, wonderfully said. Well said.
Thank you.
So the next topic I hoped you would talk about is the poetry. There's a
Yeah.
lot of wonderful poetry that you've written in the
Thank
book.
you.
And throughout the book, she's written wonderful different one-pagers. See, I've marked it up. I've got red all through it.
Thank you.
So Maryam has written wonderful poetry and comes from an artist family.
Yes.
Father is an artist, is that correct?
Yes, he is. It's one of his pieces behind me. But yes, I come from a family of artists and a culture of poetry.
And what's your culture?
From Iran. So the Persian background keeps the poetry alive, from Hafez and Rumi and Said. So there's a processing that I grew up with, that we process certain experiences and teachings through poetic verse. And so I've used poetry as my processing. And I actually wrote a blog, it's on the website, about using poetry for processing trauma. And I give a whole little thing about it. And I'll just share what's been interesting, because, when you write a book, you want to include the different dimensions of yourself. So I have poetry, I have drawings, some of my father's drawings, and it's like, are people even going to like this? They're going to be like, oh, let me go through these images really quickly. And Bita, who's the designer, did a lot of the illustrations. People have asked her for the images so they can frame them and put them in their house. And last week someone said, your poetry is what has really captured me and inspired me. And so just thank you for bringing it up. I've done several of these interviews and no one has brought up the poetry, so I appreciate you bringing it up. And the poetry is designed to be a place of pause and to shut down the linear thought and come in through another side of the brain for experience.
Would you like to close out our talk with a short poem, and then you can give us your website so we can find you?
Absolutely. Okay, I'll take this. I'll read this one. I turn to this, so I'm going to trust alignment. Okay. So, absorbing the world, I take it in. Trusting the nourishment that is fed. Closing my eyes, I trust the world, I take it in. Then one day, the body says, no, you can't take that in, or that, or this, and definitely not that. But you can take this, oh, and that. You can absorb this way, but not that way. The body knows something, so I humbly listen because I love.
Lovely. Lovely.
Thank you. And
Lovely.
You can appreciate. Thank you so much. And may the book help you become incredible listeners of your temples.
So
this is the temple. Yeah.
Tell us where we can find the book. What is your website, and the website for your studio?
Okay, thank you. So you can buy it on Amazon. The book's available there, and the studio is belovedyoga.com. And my own website is my own name, MaryamOvissi.com, and that's where you can find all the free videos and resources. A lot of my talks are there, and just a way to be nourished. So thank you so much, Julian, for giving me this time and for the conversation. The perfect thing to do on this Monday, start of our week.
Thank you. So for those of you who are listening, we do this at the end of yoga. They do this in India and Nepal. When I hiked in Nepal, whenever I was in a situation that might not be working out because of the translation, I said, namaste. It went a long way. So this means peace. It means hello. It means a lot of things. So if you've enjoyed our discussion, we would appreciate it if you would comment. This is a Facebook Live video, and just share this with other people so that Miriam's message can be cast far and wide. So in summary, she talked about breathing deeply, about taking breaks during the day, even if you're at your desk, getting with your kids, your parents, your pets, doing yoga, not only perhaps in the studio, if you don't feel comfortable there, you can do it online, but make sure that the distractions have been removed, that everyone respects your time, even if you have to go into a smaller space or a closet somewhere. She also talked about meditation, becoming quiet with yourself, perhaps focusing on a candle. She also talked about poetry. So for those of you who want to express yourself, who are artists, try to look at that. And if you can purchase the book, this would be fabulous, because it's thin, it's an easy read, but she's designed it in such a way that you can follow steps and do different things during the day. So I have found this in my journey, and I recovered from 4 car accidents over 20 years, autoimmune issues, devastation, financial ruin, and yoga was a big part of me calming my nervous system, getting one with myself, and reducing the distractions. So I'm Julianne with Healthy Living with Julianne. Namaste.